Okay, thank you. So now it's to the council, and we might do well to separate our remarks into focusing on the appeal at hand, and then larger policy issues. I'm sure they'll intersect, but that would be helpful. And Mr. Dominguez, you were first, Mr. Rouse, and then Mr. Hart.
So I want to start by just thanking both of the parties. The applicants are trying to keep their successful business going, and I appreciate that. This is, in my district, and I want to see the revenue. I want to see visitors from out of town who will support our local businesses. So to that extent, I really applaud you and your work. To the appellant, same thing. I applaud your work. Your presentation, and as well as Mrs. Allen's, were just blue chip 5-star presentations. It's clear you're taking your role seriously, and you worked really hard. So I want to commend you as just a community resident who's gone way above the call of duty. I really want to applaud you. Regarding sound community planning, I don't think backing up onto Gutierrez, one of the busiest one-way streets in the city, is anything that we consider sound. It's dangerous. Someone could die. There are kids riding their skateboards there. There are trucks backing up. There's hedges on the property, from what I could tell from the picture, that are out of compliance with city code. This property has been out of compliance with city code, so I appreciate the fact that you guys have taken the steps to bring it into compliance. But when I'm dealing with a business, I have a different level that I want to see you guys comply with than just a resident or homeowner. We absolutely have to have you guys at 100% compliance. And, seeing, that the county assessment shows 4 bedrooms and that you've been assessed at $300,000, I think by putting off your permit, you've probably kept your tax bill low. And so that worries me, that type of practice. The parking, if we can do the 3 spot where people can turn in and come out, I think that's probably a compromise. There's a problem here with having the bedroom definition not really cut and dry, because it's pretty clear you can have a lot more people in here than 3 cars. I imagine you're right. Most of the time it might be 3 cars, but a lot of the time it's going to be more, particularly bridal parties. I have some experience recently with out-of-town guests from Pittsburgh who rented a big house and had a bunch of rental cars. They were in Mr. Gutierrez's district, and when I went to visit, I had to park about 2 blocks away before I could walk over to the house. So I know these things on some days when there's no guests can be fine, maybe the cleaner and the landscaper's there, but on other days it could be really bad. Particularly, we saw pictures where there was a party. So in actuality, there probably was a parking impact. There are several businesses there that are very successful, and ultimately that's the goal, is to have all of our businesses successful. So I would make the motion that we deny the appeal on the condition that the applicants use the 3 parking lot solution that Ms. Allen presented. So that'd be my motion, if there's a second.
Is there a second to that? That was a second from Mr. Hart. We'll continue discussing. If you don't like that motion, say so. Mr. Rouse, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Rouse. I just wanted to clarify. The hedge is in compliance. Is that Ms. Unzueta? I'm sorry, Mr. Rouse. Mr.
It's not now, but it will be.
Okay. We'll get that out of the way. Mr. Rouse,
Now
forgive
it's
me.
my turn?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Ostringer for reminding us that we are talking about an ad hoc, one situation as opposed to a broader policy discussion, because it's easy to slip into that. We give people a process to follow, and sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't get it right. It's a little arcane, it's onerous, but we do have a process. And whether we agree with it or not, whether we agree with the idea of short-term rentals, we set up the rules. If the rules get followed and they get approved, I think we should abide by it. So I don't want to send this applicant back to ABR for the 3rd parking space. Even though it'd be great to have a 3rd parking space, they'd have to lose the gate off their driveway, and it's basically double jeopardy because there's a very good chance it would be appealed again. And I don't think that's fair. I think that both sides have gone through a lot, but the applicant is certainly a side that's gone through quite a bit. So I am not in favor of the motion along those lines. I'd like to approve it. I'd like to deny the appeal based on the ABR findings. One of the more compelling things is the neighbor stakeholders are here, the people who actually live next to this property. And they're in favor of this property going forward. They've thought their neighbors have been good performers so far. They had an STR there before. We're not losing housing. It's going to be an STR converted into a legal STR. So, but once again, I think that if we give somebody a process and they have a reasonable expectation that there's an end to the process and that's what we're doing, then we should abide by that. If we want to change the process, we can have that conversation, not tonight, but later on. But for right now, I think we should uphold our process, uphold our discretionary review boards, even though they had to use something like sound community planning. Good Lord, I don't know how you wrap around that. But I'm going to vote to deny the appeal and uphold the ABR decision per the 2 parking spaces so that we can give some finality to this project and don't see it again.
Okay, well argued. Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I think that the unique circumstances of this particular project in this neighborhood lead me to denying the appeal and approving the 3 parking space plan. We've had other projects that came forward that weren't able to provide that much parking. There is the fact that this is in the central business district in the parking zone of benefit is in unique, specific circumstances for this particular project. And as Councilmember Rouse mentioned, the really overwhelming neighborhood support for this. I've never seen quite a situation like this, certainly when it comes to short-term vacation rental applications where you have, 402 is the applicant, 406 is the support of it, 412, 416, 418, 420, almost all the neighbors immediately adjacent to this that are most affected who've had experience with this operator for many, many years and are here taking time out of their day to be supportive of this project. That is completely unique from all the other applications that we've had. And so I think on balance, this specific project is worth moving forward on.
And you like the idea of the 3 parking spots?
Yeah, that's critical for my support of the motion. I understand the dilemma of the ABR and the potential for an appeal. I would hope that the appellant has had an opportunity to have the council carefully consider this project. I think she's well-intended with her advocacy, and this council has been generally supportive of that advocacy. So I would hope that, in this circumstance, with these facts, in this situation, we might not actually have an appeal. And I would like Landmark or ABR just to look at the landscaping element. I know Mr. Vincent mentioned that there might be some way we could structure our approval to get a path like that. I don't know if he's probably thinking about that as we're talking, and we'll let him weigh in as we get closer to consensus.
And it's not just the 3rd parking spot, but also the ability to turn around inside the property?
Yeah, that's inherent in the design,
okay.
is the ability to back out of or not back out onto Gutierrez Street, to have a safe turning movement that keeps the car on site before it gets out onto Gutierrez Street. So this is really a very thoughtful, uniquely designed plan, very different than the other projects that we've considered.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman?
So, wow. Welcome to council, Oscar. So I've gone back and forth on this. I think this is one where I think both sides are actually correct in their in the cases they made out. I thought both gave good presentations. So I'll be supporting the motion that Councilmember Dominguez made. A lot of what I had consternation with was the larger policy issues, and there's a lot there. It's why I asked the question of why these are even allowed right now, and that took place in 2015. But Councilman Rouse had it correct that there is a process in place, and if the 7 of us don't like that process, it's up to us to change it, and it's inherently unfair for applicants to come in to that process, spend all the time. Everyone knows how rigorous Santa Barbara's process can be, and spend all the money, all the time, all our staff time on it, and then at the end, because we don't like our own process, we spot zone you or we deny you because of that. So that's inherently unfair to any project applicant. But I do have strong concerns. I mentioned a lot of them today, in particular with the RENA housing numbers. For every house we lose, we have to build 2, or residences that we lose, we have to build 2 just to get ahead. And when I was on the panel for the Coastal Housing Coalition with Senator Scott Wiener, who SB 35 was there, he did SB 827 this year, and he said to a room 300 or so people just a couple months ago in May, that the state is going through a painful process, and it's going to be painful for every jurisdiction in the state over the next few years. But the state is basically saying that housing should be treated the same way we treat education and other issues where the state sets the parameters. So he's going to be bringing back in the SB 827 in a new form. So we're going to have all these issues that we're going to be dealing with the state. And so every time we take a unit off, it makes it that much more likely that we're going to lose local control. So, but again, that's, as we were reminded by our city attorney, that's not why we're here today. And so I do appreciate the neighborhood support there. There is one other concern I have, but it looks like we are going to be able to get to a solution on this, and it's something that happened at the Harbor Commission. It happened after I was there, and it was pretty recently, but it was that there was a slip holder who had problems paying their fees. They hadn't paid them, and the harbor was going to revoke their slip for their boat. He came in and made a good case on why they should keep it, and 2 of the commissioners said, you got to uphold the process, and the other 5 said, no, we have these other concerns are overriding, and they allowed him to an extension. The next day, he had a buyer sold the boat the next day for an inflated price. And so I'm not saying you're going to do that, just don't get me wrong, but I'm looking at like down the line when you're no longer the owners of the house, like 20, 30 years, because what we're doing is making a permanent change here. And so these issues that you don't have problems with today, a new owner could change that. And that's a concern I have. But again, there's no right answer here for me today. So I'm going to go with what appears to be a compromise with my colleagues here and support the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Ms. Sneddon?
I'll also be supporting the motion, but I want to get back to the policy question of how are we going to address this? I mean, when you talk about housing, we bring it up a lot, and in your analogy of public school, I mean, I like to be a charter school and use our discretion to make choices and to make a plan that suits our needs specifically to Santa Barbara. And I think we have a majority new council here, and I think it's time. And we have touched on it a little bit today, and I'd like to really follow through to what is our process going to be to address these questions, because I agree with you, we have a process in place. If people are following the process, yes, you get approval, but what are we going to do to look at this process again?
Well, let's ask, Mr. Buell is sitting in the audience, our city planner is available, Mr. Casey used to be our planning director. What is the next opportunity to look at the vacation rental issue?
Madam Mayor, council members, I think it depends on what it is. And I've only heard from Ms. Sneddon, Councilwoman Sneddon, about what she would like to look at. So ultimately, we need a majority of council to prioritize a work effort on some scope of policy work and prioritize that over something that we're already working on. As you know, we're kind of at the full maximum from a planning standpoint. And if this is a priority over something else that we're already working on, that's why we have the semi-annual meetings. So you could tee up some discussion to weigh against the existing work program that we have. But I would need a little more definition about what it is. If it's just conversion of any existing residential unit to any other use other than residential, that I don't know if that's the policy question you're having. Is it just the short-term vacation rental that you no longer want to allow, where you currently the existing ordinance does allow them where hotels are allowed. So I don't have a good definition of what it is you're looking to do. And then there's just the priority workload setting that you need to
Okay.
consider.
We can continue our deliberations and get back to that. So, Mr. Gutierrez, your turn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say that I respect the ability of a homeowner to do what they like with their property. My mother and father sacrificed so much so they could own the property that we live at now, and I know the struggle. I could feel it from you, when you were speaking, and I respect that, and I respect the fact that you went through all the gauntlet that the city put you through, and the thing that worries me is that I have experienced what the Airbnb does to a neighborhood, because I've had friends who have specifically used Airbnbs just to party because they didn't want to do it in their house or their apartment. And it felt wrong when I would go there. And it makes me worried because there was no parking on those streets to begin with, and then we would take it up. And on top of that, it also makes me worried about the amount of housing and the crisis that we're in. Just earlier today, before I got here to City Hall, I ran into a police officer who grew up with my brother around the block from where we live now. And I asked him, how, do you still live here? And he said no, they couldn't afford it. And it breaks my heart that, to see a Latino who came from the same neighborhood that I came from, to serve our community, not be able to live in this city because of a lack of housing. So, I'm split, just like a lot of my fellow council members are. And I just want to say that I'll be supporting the motion by Councilman Dominguez as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank everybody who came out, and I'll be supporting the motion as well. I think the ABR did their due diligence. The 3 spaces and the turnaround ability is influencing me greatly. The immediate neighbors being supportive, not just supportive, but they're here for hours supporting the applicant. And it's been functioning as a vacation rental with no complaints. And I'm persuaded that the small number of applications to convert to vacation rentals, I thought it was going to be off the charts when we did our thing in 2015. So that, Councilmember Snedden, I'm not as panicky about the larger policy issues. If there had been hundreds of people wanting to create vacation rentals, we do need to continue enforcing on the ones that are illegal. This would be a commercial use in a commercial zone. The loss of housing, I was persuaded that one of the slides you had here said the city's on target to meet or exceed the quantified objectives. 553 new units permitted between January 2018 and December 2017. Maybe it's the other way. But 101 affordable units and 452 above moderate. So, and then with the ADUs as well, I would rather have it be an apartment, but for long-term rental. But you have gone through the gauntlet, as Councilmember Gutierrez said, and you've followed the rules. So those are my comments. The motion then, Madam Clerk, is to deny the appeal and to request that the applicant use the alternative parking plan.
I would say
And
on
go
the
back to
condition
A-
of, not as a request.
Okay, on the condition of using the alternate parking plan and going back to ABR. Mr. Vincent.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. I was going to request to speak to the motion. As I mentioned before, the three parking space design hasn't been seen by ABR, and it's my understanding that the design, even in its conceptual form that's been presented to the council today, would be requiring a waiver of the typical landscape standards associated with the design. With that in mind, my recommendation would be that with this motion conditioned upon the 3 parking space alternative, that you direct the design of the project. So you would have development plan approval upheld by the city council, directing the design to go back to the ABR for final approval of the 3 parking space design and the consideration of the parking landscape waiver. And that would be my recommendation for the motion.
Is the motion maker and the seconder okay with that?
Can you say it one more time, please?
Or
Sure.
Ms. Gorman? Okay.
I'm sure Ms. Gorman would appreciate it if I said it first. All right. It would be that you're denying the appeal and upholding the decision of the Architectural Board of Review, approving the development plan approval, conditioned upon the alternative parking design with 3 parking spaces.
Slow down.
This is being recorded, right?
It is, but I would like to read it back into the record so we all know what's
Understood.
going on after the, okay, approving the development plan approval condition.
Conditioned upon the use of the alternative parking design with 3 parking spaces, subject to the design returning to Architectural Board of Review for final approval and a waiver of the parking landscape design standards.
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Do you want to repeat it
I thought that's
back?
what I said. So Madam City Attorney, do you want me to change my motion to incorporate that, or what technically would you like me to do? Okay,
Make an amendment, okay.
I'll amend my motion if my seconder so agrees.
Okay. We're in agreement, it looks like. If you're ready, Ms. Gorman?
Yes, and I would like to read it back into the record. Sorry for taking so long. I appreciate your
Please
patience.
do.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Dominguez, second by Councilmember Hart, to deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the Architectural Board of Review approving the development plan approval conditioned upon the use of the alternative parking design with 3 parking spaces, subject to the design returning to the ABR for final approval and a waiver of the parking landscape design standards.
Okay.
Okay?
And Mr. Rouse, I'm not sure if you've been persuaded. It would sure be nice to have a unanimous agreement on a difficult decision, but just my last little,
Well, if you put it that way. No, I mean, I like I said, I hesitate to send it back to ABR, but it does seem like that's the consensus, so I'll go with it.
very good, you're a gentleman. Let's do a roll call, Madam Clerk.
Very good. Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez. Mayor Pro Tem Rouse.
Aye.
Councilmember Hart. Councilmember Snedden.
Yes.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Yes.
And Mayor Maria.
Aye. Okay,
Passes unanimously.
okay. We'll close that item.